Hello and welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by BJ Cunningham. We're going to discuss the final doubleheader of the Major League Baseball regular season and take an early look at the 2024 Major League Baseball playoffs, which will get underway on Tuesday, October 1st. But first, the Mets and the Braves do have a doubleheader on Monday to squeeze in to determine the final two playoff spots in the National League. What's at stake? If either team sweeps, they would make the playoffs with the Arizona Diamondbacks. If both teams win one game, they will each be in, and the Diamondbacks will go home, depending on who wins. Depending on the tiebreakers, either the Mets or the Braves could end up going, or the Diamondbacks could end up going to Milwaukee or to San Diego for Tuesday's matchup. So the Mets may end up going right back to Milwaukee, where they just came from, but still much to determine based on how today plays out. Looking at this matchup, I don't project any value for game one. There's no line out for game two. The Braves are going to start Spencer Schwellenbach in game one. The Mets are going to start Tyler McGill. If the Mets lose game one, they've said they'll start Luis Severino in game two. If the Braves lose game one, they said they will start Chris Sale in game two. So crucial for both teams to get that game one, to get their players rested in there for game two, so that they can travel and play a playoff game tomorrow without blowing out their entire roster. And this game two may be one of the worst things you've ever seen, because whoever wins game one is completely disincentivized from winning the second game. You may as well throw a position player out there to pitch. For karmic purposes, it probably won't work out for you in the end, but in terms of getting through the day and getting to the playoffs with a well-rested roster, that is probably in your best interest to just not throw anybody of consequence in game two if you win game one. I projected the game one line at about minus 140 for Atlanta. I made the total 7.6, so there's no value for me on the matchup. If I got under 8 at minus 110, I would probably consider jumping in. If I got the Mets at plus 155 or better, the Braves at minus 125 or better, those would be my price targets. We're not going to get a game two line, though, until game one ends and we know who's pitching in game two. So there's only going to be about a 15 to 20 minute window to see the line, project the line, and even get those bets in. So just have the game one line for now. Just have a game one projection for now. BJ, it's a pass for me. I think it's also a pass for you, right?
Yeah, it's pass for me. Not only that 15 window just projected, but you got to change up lineups as well, because, whoever wins this is probably not going to play any of their normal hitters. It could be a bullpen game. It's going to be, unfortunately the books aren't nice enough to give us both lines so we can parlay both outcomes together. But in any case, no bet here for me. Taylor McGill, great stuff. His location and his command has been, a tad off a little bit here. Schwellenbach, now, we'll talk about this, I guess. It's that Schwellenbach has been very good over the second half of the season, 10th best xFIP since the All-Star break. But it's very important for the Braves to be able to win this first game so they can avoid using Sale in a game two scenario and have him lined up to start game one against San Diego, who has pretty drastic splits between righties and lefties. They don't hit lefties that well. So if the Braves can set up both Sale and Fried for games 1 and 2 in San Diego, it's really, really important for them to win game one. And we'll kind of get into that as how important that is. We'll get into that later on in the show.
Absolutely. When we get to futures, we will be bringing up the Atlanta Braves once again. But let's turn our attention to the American League, because these two series for the wild card round are set. The Kansas City Royals will travel to Baltimore to face the Orioles. The Houston Astros will host the red-hot Detroit Tigers, who are probably the hottest team in baseball as of late. No value on me for either game one line that is out currently. I projected Houston at minus 127 with a total of 6.77. I projected Baltimore with Corbin Burns against Cole Reagans at minus 140 with the total of 6.74. So I align with the market on both games. And generally speaking, when I align with the market on game one, I also align with the series money line market as well. Have not projected these out yet. I'm going to project them out today once I figure out the NL series, or I'll do it at some point this afternoon. But assumed I would not show value on either of these AL wildcard series. I don't show value on game one, so they will both be a pass for me as of now for Tuesday. We'll be back here on Tuesday to discuss both of these games in further detail. But BJ, taking a look at the AL from a wider perspective, Detroit versus Houston, Kansas City versus Baltimore. Any bets for you on those series as of today, and any bets for you for Game 1 as of today you want to give out?
I think that there is maybe just a small amount of value on Kansas City against Baltimore in their series. There's a plus 145 out there for them on the series price. If you go through, Sean went through this, in his article that you should go read now. But from a series perspective, if you take the 3 projection models, Fangraphs, ATC, the bats, and you average those out together, you get close to about plus 135-ish in that type of range for Kansas City. I went and projected out the series. I was closer to around plus 130. I think it was plus 138 on Kansas City. So plus 145, I think there is a little bit of value on Kansas City. And if you look at, overall for the season, Kansas City, their metrics, the clear weakness of them was their bullpen, right? Like they were really bad for the first half of the season. They go at the deadline, they get Lucas Urseg, and over the last 30 days, they actually have the 3rd best xFIP in baseball in terms of their bullpen. Mm-hmm. The offense is obviously electric with Bobby Witt. And it's it'll be interesting to see what the Orioles actually do to set up their starting rotation here, because they're obviously going to go with Burns. The Royals have this clear disadvantage against left-handed pitching. They're the worst offense against lefties in the playoffs. Do you start Povich, even though he hasn't been that good this season, just to get a good matchup, or do you stick with?
Povich was awesome in September. Yeah, I would start Povich. He was great in September. I think he's starting to break out. So they needed somebody to come along and replace Grayson. I think Povich gave them a big lift. His strikeout minus walk rate surged in September. So yeah, I think he definitely gets the ball. I would imagine behind Burns and Eflin in Game 3, but yeah, I think he's pretty confidently gonna pitch for the Baltimore.
Okay.
I actually don't like Kansas City much. I think their lineup is a little bit shallow. Since Vinny Pasquantino got hurt, I just don't think they've been nearly as effective. They also limped to the playoffs, 12-18 in their past 30 games. The bullpen has improved. It still rates, though, for me, as one of the lesser bullpens in the playoffs. And behind Reagan's, I viewed Waka and Lugo as, regression candidates the entire season. Both of them pitch way over their heads. I get the argument. I generally, though, when I projected all these teams out, found Kansas City, it's the teams who sort of like surprised people getting into the end, right? Kansas City, Detroit, those 2 teams, in addition to, I want to find it, the Tigers, Detroit, or the Tigers, Kansas City, and I guess Arizona too. Like Baltimore, none of these teams rated really highly when I put in their true talent ratings, like as of where they are right now. So I run a projection at the beginning of the year, right? Give out my win totals, my projected win totals, compare those to the market. That is a combination of a true talent rating and then also adjusting for strength of schedule. For playoffs, to figure out where all these teams stand, I'm ranking them out in terms of true talent, how good I think they are right now. If you were to restart a 162-game season, the Yankees were at the top of the AL. They were like a 94-win team for me. The Royals were closer to an 81-win team. Looking at their roster right now, restarting the season, I don't think it's as formidable as they were at the peak of the year. The one underrated thing with their roster is the defense and base running, because they rated, I believe, number 1 by outs above average. They also rank really high in both sprint speed and base running value. They were 7th in base running value this year, 1st in defensive or outs above average, 7th in defensive run saves. So the Royals have some hidden advantages behind the scenes where Houston ranked as a poor defensive team. Houston does not run the base as well. So big bullpen advantage for Houston in that matchup. Starting pitching advantage clearly in games 2 and 3. But other than that, and a better lineup. But I think if you factor in the defense, the base running, Kansas City has a chance to do some sneaky things. Baltimore and Kansas City, as I mentioned, Grayson injured for the Orioles. Povich pitched really well in September. Strikeout minus walk rate surged. I would probably lean to the Royals in that series. I think the Royals have a chance of pulling the upset. So yeah, I'm with you, BJ. Plus 145. I need to run my math for it. I would imagine. So I was closer to siding with Kansas City in Game 1. Mm-hmm. I would imagine my projection is around a break-even price.
Yeah.
on the Royals. I'll consider betting them to pull the upset, though, because I am down on this Baltimore team. Looking at the Detroit and Houston series, really good pitching. Tarek Skubal obviously going, or presumably going in game one for Detroit. Short series, maybe they, with that starting pitching edge, they can pull the upset. The reason why I like the Royals more than the Tigers from a underdog perspective is they just put the ball in play more. Detroit has the highest strikeout rate amongst all the teams in the playoffs. Their offense did improve in the second half, getting a ton of guys back from injury, but they're still, it's a 24% strikeout rate. Kansas City strikes out 19% of the time. That's a drastic difference between these two offenses. So even though Detroit has maybe a little bit more pop, maybe a little bit more overall effectiveness, if you're giving me two offenses for the playoffs, even though I think that Kansas City offense took a hit in the second half, I might still take them just putting the ball in play more. BJ, you have a way that you're considering playing this Tigers-Astros series. You could also kind of play an open parlay, bet Detroit in game one, maybe Houston come back in game two, and then decide if you want to play game three. But you're taking the Astros to win the series from behind, to lose game one and win games 2 and 3 at about plus 450. Tell me why.
I think you said it best. I can't remember if it was off camera or on camera, Sean, but the Tigers are just so Skubal reliant with their pitching. Like, he is just everything to them. He's going to start game one, and obviously Framber has been very good. But if the Tigers are able to win game one, then it's most likely going to be Reese Olson and then maybe Casey Mize or Kiter Montero. One of those three combinations.
Mixed in there. It's like a whole mix of matching of the arms that they've been doing for the past 6 weeks.
Yeah, and the bullpen isn't, it's okay. Like, if you look over the last 30 days, I think they're like 13th in xFIP or something like that. Like, pretty average bullpen. So, if you believe in Tariq Skubal, who has been obviously awesome all season long, and the odds for game one, I think Houston's around minus 130 right now, 135-ish in that type of range. I think plus 450 is a decent spot given how big of a favorite I think Houston's going to be in game two and game three as well. So that's the only way I'd play this series. Composite projection for me and the other three projection models of Fangraphs got me to minus 165. So, that's right in line with what the series price is. So if you want to have some fun and, you want to back Skubal, I think a plus 450 on Tigers to win game one and then Houston to end up winning the series, I think has a little bit of value.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting look. It's probably how I go about playing it. It's not even so much like Skubal's. He is so much better than the bigger guys in their staff, but it's about him giving them innings to set up their bullpen for games 2 and 3. Like, he needs to get through 7 innings, save the relievers, and then you have the ability to just go bullpen heavy in games 2 and 3. That could really make things much closer because Houston, for me, has the best bullpen in the American League. That's part of the reason I like them as a potential World Series contender. They're the only American League bullpen that finished with a sub-4 BOT ERA. They also have the highest Stuff Plus rating in the American League, 110 Stuff Plus, Yankees at 109, and they have the highest pitching plus rating in the AL, tied with Cleveland and Baltimore for their bullpen at 101. But I really like this Astros reliever group. If you adjust Hector Neris for what he's done since they acquired him from Chicago. The back of the lineup is what concerns me. And I guess figuring out whether or not they're going to give innings to Justin Verlander concerns me a little bit because I don't want them to. It's kind of like the Clayton Kershaw thing with the Dodgers from recent years where you're like, I like the Dodgers more if they don't throw Clayton Kershaw. I like the Astros much more if they decide that Justin Verlander is not a significant part of this playoff team. It seems like they're trending that direction, but I still don't want them to give him the ball in game 3 of a 5-game series over Hunter Brown, or I don't want him getting the ball in game 4 of a 7-game series over Ronel Blanco or Spencer Arrighetti. And I think he would get it over Arrighetti. I'm not so sure about Blanco. So we'll see what the Astros pitching plans are regarding these playoffs. But I think pretty clearly Kikuchi, Valdez, some order games 1 and games 2. I would like to see Hunter Brown in game 3 and then Ronel Blanco and a Spencer Arrighetti piggyback in game 4. Bigger picture ticket items for the American League, the teams I see value on. I did bet Houston a few weeks ago at 10-1. I project, and you can find all of my math on actionnetwork.com. I put out my playoff preview for today with all of my updated projections, updated composite projections as well from Fangraphs, Bakota, ATC, and the BAT X. So you can compare my projections to those publicly available projections. But the two teams that popped off as value teams in the American League are the two favorites, the two teams with buys, the Yankees and the Guardians. I think the Yankees have a relatively easy path to getting to the ALCS. I think they're in the softer half of the bracket. I like the matchups they would have against Baltimore or Kansas City in the second round. I projected their pennant odds just about 40%, about plus 150 implied, plus 151. So you could take about plus 160 or better on the Yankees to win the pennant. And I also show value on their World Series odds as well. I projected those. I want to get the actual number for you guys. I projected the Yankees at plus 355 to win the World Series. You can get plus 450 at best available odds. I would take 4-1 or better. Their consensus implied odds around plus 35. They were the only team in the American League that showed value both on my projection and the composite projection. So taking the number one overall seed in the American League at this stage as the value team. That said, the Guardians show value too. I think they're getting a little bit underrated with the buy. I made their World Series line 8-1. You can get 11-1 or better. I also showed value on their pennant odds as well. My only position currently in the American League is the Astros. I made that line about 10-1 currently for the World Series. That's a little bit higher than what their fair odds are. So I wouldn't bet into Houston again at this point. I partially took them when I did because I thought there was a chance they had to overtake Cleveland for the second bye in the American League. But yeah, Astros and Guardians, my value teams right now. I'm going to consider if I want to play either team at this stage, if I'm going to wait until I see their potential ALDS matchups, because I do expect Houston and Kansas City ultimately to advance. But BJ, any AL pennant for futures or futures value for you that you see right now?
None for me right now. If I were to do anything, I would lean with you towards the Yankees. I think the path is just way too easy for them. I'm not sure that there's an offense out there. Maybe Houston would be the only offense that could actually keep up with what the Yankees have. Yeah, and they, Tucker back is great and everything, but they can't keep up with, Judge and Soto and all those guys. So, yeah, I think that, it'll be interesting to see. The Yankees obviously have the best starting pitching, I would say, of any, team in the American League as well. So it's really just going to come down to their bullpen, which has obviously been shaky this season. And like you mentioned, they haven't been the best bullpen in the American League. And that will be a clear advantage if they end up playing the Guardians in the ALCS. But for me, yeah, I'm passing on all AL pennant futures because at the end of the day, Sean, we have a mutual hatred for this Yankee team. And I don't know if I can get my money behind them.
I'm a little bit worried about Houston too. Like Houston's going to face a hell of a pitching effort from Detroit and then potentially from Cleveland in back-to-back rounds where they're just going to face a different arm every inning. Like it's going to be a nightmare for Houston to get through those two series, then get to the ALCS. They're probably going to have to play a lot of aggressive bullpen matchups as well. So the Yankees, by nature of having the bye, by nature of their likely ALCS opponents, exhausting their bullpens before they even get there, I think that is what saves this poor Yankees bullpen and potentially is able to get them through the AL playoffs. They also offensively do not strike out that much. I think that's what really caught my attention. I believe they have the second lowest strikeout rate. They're third lowest in the American League, but so Kansas City's at 19.3%, Cleveland at 20.2%, the Yankees at 21.2%, the Dodgers also 21.4%. Two teams with a ton of power do not strike out much. That's a very good sign for both of those teams offensively in October, the fact that they do not strike out relative to the amount of power that they inject into the baseball. The Yankees, though, do not run the bases well at all. They're 30th in sprint speed, 30th in base running value. If they're not hitting home runs, they are probably not scoring runs in bunches. So that is like the one big detractor from the Yankees. If you're taking the Guardians, you're taking lesser starting pitching. You're getting a much better bullpen, and you're getting a much better defensive and base running team. So I'm trying to figure out if I want to bet anything for Cleveland standing in the potential path of the Astros in the ALDS, but I do think they're the value team. I might wait to see if I just want to take a series price straight up on the Guardians instead of taking their AL futures, or if I want to take both the Yankees and the Guardians. I was up until 5:30 in the morning writing this futures preview, so I haven't been able to find the bandwidth to make a proper decision as to how I want to handle the American League, but it's clear for me the Yankees, the Guardians, the two value teams. And just to reiterate, the Yankees were also the only team in the American League that popped up as a value team based on the consensus available projections. So I think it's pretty clear Yankees and Guardians, for me in the American League, is the value teams right now. Moving over to the National League, a bit murkier because we do not know what the wild card round matchups are going to look like. We'll know more as of about 4 p.m. today once the Mets or Braves have a win under their belt in the doubleheader. But from a big picture perspective, my two value teams in the National League are the Braves and the San Diego Padres. And the Braves in particular, I'm hesitant to bet because their chances are hurt significantly if they have to pitch Chris Sale in Game 2 today. Pitching Chris Sale, not having him available for the wild card round, having the back end of your rotation, basically pitching in that 3-game series, that would harm their chances to a significant degree. But if they can get through Game 1 and have Sale available for a Game 1, either against the Padres or the Brewers, I think that would be a big lift for the Atlanta Braves. And right now, I project value on their futures. I made their World Series odds about 17-1. You can get 25-1 or better. I made their pennant odds. Plus 818. I believe you can get around 15-1 or better, 12-1 or better. So 13-1 or better on Atlanta to win the NL pennant. Their rotation with Sale and Fried and Spencer Schwellenbach, who I'm really high on, and Reynaldo Lopez, who's been phenomenal this year. They don't need Charlie Morton. They have what I would rank as the second best bullpen in the National League, but really like neck and neck with the San Diego Padres. And the lineup is what's going to be the concern, especially Austin Riley not going to come back. He's out for the year now. So their offense is going to have to piece it together, but this is an organization that won the World Series without Ronald Acuna Jr. back in 2019. They're expertly run. They're extremely smart. And I think there's tons of value on this team right now. I also think the projections, or like the publicly available projections, the betting market, I think it's missing the fact that whoever wins Game 1 is so disincentivized from trying Game 2 that these teams are so likely to both win at least one game today that I'm really not concerned about them not getting in. I'm just concerned about the order in which they win those two games. So the Atlanta Braves, definite futures value for me. BJ will echo those thoughts more in a second. I just want to close talking about the San Diego Padres, who have been the futures team I've been backing for the past 2 months. Not sure if I want to add more at this stage. I certainly project value on both their World Series and pennant odds. I make them plus 475 to win the World Series, 10-1 to win the NL pennant. I would bet those down to about 11-1 and 6-1 plus 550 respectively. I think those are good price targets on San Diego. They don't strike out. They have the lowest strikeout rate in baseball offensively. They put the ball in play constantly. Fernando Tatis Jr. has also looked phenomenal since coming off the IL in September. They have the best bullpen in baseball. They have since the trade deadline when they added Jason Adam and Tanner Scott. But they not only rank first in expected FIP, strikeout minus walk rate, also by pitch modeling metrics, body ERA, pitching plus, they rank across the board as the best bullpen in baseball over that span. And then lastly, the rotation is looking like one of the best in the National League now too. Going by Eno Sarris's PPERA for the top 4 starters in a rotation, the Padres have the lowest projected ERA amongst their starting rotation for the playoffs. Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish both came back healthy in September. They've both been excellent. And Michael King and Dylan Cease have better second half splits this year than first half splits. Everybody in their rotation is throwing the ball well. It's the best bullpen in baseball. It's a lineup that doesn't stop putting the ball in play. I love this Padres team. I think there's tremendous value on their World Series and pennant odds. I'm already pretty invested. I might end up adding more, even though they have a potential very tough NLDS lineup against the Dodgers. I think they're the better team. I think they win that matchup, and I think they get to the NLCS against the Phillies. BJ, looking at a bigger picture perspective in the National League, because as I said, we don't have any series set here yet. Any teams that pop out to you from a value perspective, any futures you're riding currently? I don't know if you join me on the Padres at any point, but any thoughts for you on the NL right now?
I did join you on the Padres. I'm on 17-1 for the World Series. I'm not cool enough to get 25-1, but 7-1.
35, sir. 35.
Yeah, 35-1. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, if you're somebody who just hasn't been paying attention to baseball, it's the playoffs, you're tuning in. First of all, thank you for listening. The Padres are the team. If you're just like, what team do I bet now? It's the Padres, like without a doubt. Like there is some value on the Braves, and it's obviously, like Sean said, very important for them to be able to set up their rotation not completely wear out their bullpen over 2 games against the Mets, then have to travel all the way across the country potentially to play the Padres. But the Padres, like you said, they're the best bullpen in the National League. They've been one of the best offenses in baseball. Their starting rotation is set up perfectly. They have so much depth. It's like setting up like almost like too perfectly for the Padres. They did lose Hee-Sung Kim to a season-ending injury, which hurts. It's not detrimental to them. They have a very good offense even without him. But yeah, the Padres are obviously the team in the National League. The Braves at 25-1 are interesting. If I gave you a choice, who would you rather bet, the Royals or the Braves to win the World Series? It's like I don't think it's really a question of who you want to bet. It's like you said, the Braves have a rotation that's very much set up. Their bullpen over the last 30 days has the best xFIP in baseball. It just comes down to, can their offense do enough? And if they get into this series against the Padres, who have pretty drastic splits between righties and lefties, they've been below average against lefties this season. If you can pitch Sale and Fried in game 1 and game 2, that gives you a good opportunity to potentially pull off an upset. So that'll be a very interesting series price to see, if depending on how things all set up. The one other team I'll mention, and there's, even if you take all the composite projections, there's not really a lot of value on them. But the Milwaukee Brewers are going to be a very pesky team to eliminate. One of the best bullpens in baseball. Best defensive team, best base running team. Mm-hmm. The starting pitching is a huge question. They just, outside of Freddie Peralta, they don't have really much. But in these 3-game series where they can just empty their bullpen, I think it gives them a little bit of a better edge over some of these teams, like potentially the Mets, who, let's say the Mets lose, game 1 here, and then they have to pitch Severino. They're going to have to pitch Manaea, David Peterson, and I'm blanking on the third name.
It would be Quintana or they could go Severino
again.
Yeah, if Severino starts game 2 today, it won't be him. But yeah, McGill's pitched really well. He won't pitch in the wildcard round because he's pitching today. But yeah, I would imagine Manaea, Peterson, Quintana for a wildcard round. Yeah,
but so my point is that the Brewers are actually set up pretty well to take out the Mets in the wild card round here. And then once we get to the ALDS, it'll obviously be a very difficult matchup for them, for whoever they're going to face. But, there's some 20-1s, 25-1s on the Brewers out there to win the World Series, which I think may have a little bit of value. Maybe not from a mathematical standpoint, but I think they're going to be a very difficult team to face with how good their bullpen is. As we get stretched into a 7-game series, that's when it becomes a problem. But I'll be interested to see their series price against the Mets. That's maybe the way to play it.
Yeah, first in base running value, as you said, third by both defensive runs saved and outs above average this year. If you average those two together, they were the best overall defensive team by both metrics. Their offense is a little bit wonky. They don't strike out a ton, but they just don't hit for a ton of power either. That felt like they were performing much better earlier in the year. But that bullpen is stupid elite, and in a 5-game series, extremely dangerous. Once you stretch out that pitching staff to a 7-game series, I think that's where things.
That's the problem.
Yeah, a little bit hairier, but there's a chance the team could make the NLCS for sure. Because Pat Murphy's been awesome. He's managed that bullpen extremely well. They play well at home, a ton of energy, and I've felt this way for a while now, and I think Tim Kurkjian said the same yesterday. Do you feel like this is the most wide open playoff field we've had in a while? I feel like there's no definitive favorite. I feel like there's no definitive expected matchup. I guess Yankees-Dodgers is the most likely World Series outcome, but I think there's clear weaknesses with both of those teams. Do you kind of feel like this is the most wide open playoffs we've had in a while?
Yeah, because every team has a weakness. There's no one team where you can look at them and say oh my gosh, this team is so stacked. There's no way. You could think that the Yankees have an easy path in the American League, but their bullpen could do them in this entire playoffs, the entire playoffs. That could end up even in a short series. Where
the bats go cold after a week off. How often do we see that? Teams get a bye. The Braves last year, teams get a bye. You come back and you lose 2 games because the offense doesn't hit. It's it's such a short, it's over. It's just like that, 2 games. Done.
Yep. And
you don't hit for 2 days and your season's over.
Happened to the Dodgers. You have 2 bad pitching outings, and you're done. That's it. It's your season's over. So even a lot of these teams, like I said, like the Brewers, maybe don't have the best starting pitching. They get into a 5-game series, and whether, if it's against potentially the Dodgers, who like have, their starting pitching is a little bit right now. I mean, they obviously have a couple good starters, but beyond that, you get deeper into their bullpen. Like, all these teams have weaknesses. It's incredibly open, and I think that kind of goes along the lines of taking some of these longer teams like the Braves, like the Padres in the National League. Because I think, if you bet both of them, at least you're going to get one of them to the most likely to the NLDS. So, but yeah, it's very, very open. The American League looks less open, but from like just a on paper standpoint, but it actually is a lot more open when you dive deeper into it. So, yeah, I think it really behooves this year to take some long shots, and we saw some long shots make the World Series last year, so it obviously can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like it to come out of the National League again. Do you think there's value on the favorites in the American League who people may see as more vulnerable? I think people see the Dodgers and the Phillies as more comfortable number 1 and 2 seeds. The Yankees, the Guardians, maybe less justifiably so because the Astros played better in the second half. The Guardians, nobody really has a high opinion of. People, I would say, would assume that like Baltimore would be the second best team in the American League. Baltimore's third or fourth best for me.
Yeah.
I don't think the Orioles are great. They played to a 500 record. Over the second half, they were below 500 since July 1st. There's another team, too, that was... the Phillies. The Phillies are 500 in the second half as well. The Phillies, like, very quietly played extremely poorly over the second half of the year. Their bullpen, the Phillies bullpen, also ranked around league average in expected FIP, strikeout minus walk rate. This is a bullpen that I project as second best, third best in the National League, but like neck and neck, with the Padres and the Braves. Best starting pitching in the National League, best starting pitching in the playoffs. That bullpen really underperformed in the second half. That gives me pretty significant concerns, especially with how they've gone out in the playoffs the past couple of years. I want to just briefly touch on World Series matchups, betting exact World Series matchups before we get out of here, because I looked at the odds at FanDuel, looked at the odds at BetMGM. First off, the odds at FanDuel were far better than MGM, but there's no value looking at these. So, like, I can take teams who show definitive value on their NL pennant odds, teams who show definitive value on their AL pennant odds, and I can show the exact result prop, and somehow there's no value on these exact result props because they've dejuiced them in the market, and they've dejuiced them even further than if you played straight parlays on those teams to win the AL and NL together. So if you parlayed the Padres and Yankees together to win the National League, you would get plus 1860. If you look at the exact result World Series matchup at the same book, they're giving you 18-1. So just think about maybe instead of taking those exact result matchups, try parlaying the NL pennant odds and the AL pennant odds together for the two teams you like. I would almost guarantee that you're going to get a better number than betting into the exact World Series matchup market. So just a disclaimer there. That said, on top of that, there's no value on these exact result matchups anyway. Padres, Yankees, Padres, Guardians, Braves, Yankees, Braves, Guardians. Those are the four teams that I said show value currently. Those are the teams I would mix and match if you're looking to play any of these. I think Padres, Yankees at 18-1 obviously is the most likely of the four, but I actually think it is a pretty likely World Series. If I'm going to add AL futures, it's going to be on the Yankees or Guardians, so I'll probably have some Padres, Yankees, and Padres, Guardians exposure just for fun as well. Small bets like 10th of unit on each of those. Just sprinkle them. Braves, Yankees, 55-1. Not bad as well, though. I feel like that's a potential World Series matchup I could foresee too. BJ, any thoughts on the World Series matchup market? Any long shot stabs you want to take for funsies here?
No, I would kind of go along the lines of what, like those four matchups I think are your best possible in terms of value outcomes, like the teams we've already kind of said, mixing in the Braves or the Padres in against the Yankees or the Guardians. Potentially, I think that's about the best way to go about it. If you wanted to potentially maybe, here's one I'll give you. If you maybe want to take Padres Astros, it's like 35-1. That's kind of interesting to me. But yeah, just kind of going along the lines that we said, Padres, Braves, and then, matching that up with maybe your favorite American League team might be the best way to go about betting some of these exact matchups.
Yeah, as I've been getting like the $5 football free bets and all that stuff
Hmm.
refunded over the past few weeks, I've just been betting using them on Astros and Padres World Series parlays, NL AL pennant parlays. $5 at like 30, 35 to 1, 40 to 1 over the past few weeks. So
Yeah.
I probably have, I don't know, like $50 in free bets on the Astros and Padres to make the World Series together at about 40 to 1.
Okay.
That's how you use free bets, people.
There you
That's
go.
how you do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. I think that's it's viable. And I'd say off the cuff, I'll give out my NLCS ALCS predictions. I'm gonna say Phillies Padres over Phillies. I'm gonna say Astros Yankees, Astros over Yankees. And we're gonna do Astros and Padres World Series. It's been the World Series I've been eyeing for a few weeks now. I don't think the Astros are the best team in the American League, but I do think they've been playing better in the second half, and I like the way they match up with the Yankees. I do think the Padres are the best team in the NL. I think they're the best team in baseball, top to bottom. If you restarted the season, I would have their true talent ranking very close with the Dodgers, very close to the Phillies, like within a quarter of a win, within a half a win. And I have all three of those teams better than the Yankees. So I like the National League to win the World Series. I'm going to take a look at National League World Series props. I think the last I saw, they were like minus 125 of the AL. That's probably about right. But I think there's a chance I would make it closer to minus 140. So I want to run the math on that. Because there's a chance there's value on the NL straight up over the AL from a World Series prop perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the final thoughts I have for today. BJ, any more thoughts before we get out of here?
No, now that you just mentioned that, NL one is kind of interesting because if you look at the total World Series odds, the Dodgers and the Phillies are neck and neck with the Yankees, and then you bring in the Padres and the Braves and all these other teams comparatively to Royals, Tigers, Orioles. Like there might actually be some value on that, so I might just go do a little classic addition this morning after we're done.
Absolutely.
Doing this.
You could just add up the implied odds on both sides, but I can also add up my implied projections on both sides as well and see how that compares to the betting market, see how that compares to the composite projections out there. I just want to do some quick math. So let's see, I would give the Yankees 22%, the Guardians about 11%, the Astros 8.9%, the Orioles 5%, Tigers 1.2%, and the Orioles. Yeah, so the rough math, I make the AL about 48%. So there's probably no value in that market. But if I think about it more and who I'd actually favor in a World Series, I think I'd take. Well, so first off, I believe if it goes by record, the Padres would have home field advantage over the Yankees, or does the division champion take priority? That's a rule I'm unclear on. I think it just goes by straight record, right?
It probably should, right?
In that case, I believe it does. And in that case, the Padres, the Phillies, and the Dodgers would all have home field advantage over the Yankees and the Brewers as well. So you factor that in too, potentially increase home field advantage. I need to double check on the HFA rule. I'm not used to the first wildcard team having a higher record than the best team in the other league. So I'm not used to mentally calculating for a potential World Series where the wildcard team has a better record than the number one seed in the AL. But yeah, if that is the case, if the Brewers and the Padres and the Phillies and the Braves would all have home field advantage over any team in the AL, that helps the NL chances. So we're going to say it's 52% right now for the NL, but I really think it could be closer to 55%, 60%, not 60%, maybe 57% when it's all said and done. But that'll do it for us for today. We will be back here tomorrow. We'll be back every day, every weekday that there are playoff games on the Major League Baseball slate. 4 wildcard games getting us going tomorrow. We know 2 of the matchups right now. We gave out some value teams on this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. For BJ Cunningham, I'm Sean Zerillo. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app. Make sure to leave us that 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, make sure to check out the Action Network Discord. There's a link in the episode description. As I said, we'll be back tomorrow to preview the 4 wildcard games. So be sure to subscribe to the Payoff Pitch podcast and check that out. For BJ Cunningham, I'm Sean Zerillo. Thank you for listening to Action Network's MLB Betting Podcast. This has been Payoff Pitch. We'll see you back here tomorrow.